When she tests you, it's not your ego she's after, it's her safety. Every word, every silence, every small storm she creates is her instinct's way of searching for the edge of your calm. And though she may not understand it consciously, some deeper part of her is asking if the ground beneath her emotions can truly hold her weight. Most men hear that tension and rush to defend, to argue, to control, yet in doing so they reveal the fragility of their center, because true control has never been about dominance. It has always been the art of remaining unchanged while standing inside disorder. When you stay unmoved, something ancient inside her begins to rearrange itself, as though her nervous system finally recognizes a structure it forgot existed. Her breath slows, her shoulders ease, and the storm she brought to test your foundation becomes the very proof of why she needed it. It is not attraction in the ordinary sense, not the quick spark of excitement, but a deeper form of acknowledgement that borders on reverence, the recognition that composure is safety and that safety is strength. The paradox, of course, is that almost every man mistakes this dynamic for conflict, reading her emotional surge as an attempt to humiliate or challenge, when in reality it is an unconscious request for alignment. She wants to know whether your presence is stable enough to guide both of you through uncertainty. When you react, when you meet her storm with your own, the polarity collapses, and two chaotic forces merely amplify each other. But when you remain centered, when you breathe through the noise, you provide contrast, and through contrast, she finds orientation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that a man should be like the rock against which waves continually break, yet it stands firm and tames the fury of the water. The Stoic emperor was speaking about the human mind, but his words echo perfectly in the sphere of relationship. Her emotion is not the enemy, it is the water that reveals the texture of your stone. The stronger the tide, the clearer the outline of the rock becomes. And in that revelation both find their form. The wave discovers its limit and the rock discovers its purpose. To stay unmoved does not mean to withdraw or to feign indifference. It means that even while you feel her intensity, you choose not to dissolve into it. You listen with still eyes, you speak with measured tone, and you let the rhythm of your breath dictate the tempo of the room. Presence communicates far louder than words, and silence that carries steadiness is more persuasive than any argument. What she reads in that silence is not apathy but containment. It tells her that your emotions have been trained, that they serve you instead of ruling you, and in that realization respect begins to take root. Every time you answer agitation with composure, you teach both of you a lesson about balance. Her nervous system, sensitive to energy and rhythm, gradually synchronizes with yours. The tension that once rose to provoke begins to settle in the orbit of your calm. What you are witnessing in those moments is not manipulation, but resonance. Two frequencies seeking harmony through contrast. Respect, at its core, is simply the emotional recognition of stability. The subconscious acknowledgement that here stands someone who will not disappear when pressure arrives. Yet composure is not emotional numbness. It is full awareness without surrender, the discipline to feel without falling. You will notice her tone sharpen, the flash of emotion in her eyes, the weight behind her silence, and still you will hold yourself steady, not because you are trying to win a battle, but because you have chosen mastery over reaction. In that quiet endurance, something remarkable happens. The energy that once fueled conflict begins to transform into admiration. She sees that your strength is not a posture but a principle, not a mask, but a state of being earned through inner governance. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when a man stops blaming others for his feelings, and in the same way, respect begins when a man stops blaming a woman for his instability. Her test is not an accusation but an invitation to evolve. It asks whether your discipline is real or merely rehearsed. Each time you answer that invitation with patience rather than pride, you ascend from reaction to leadership. And leadership in this sense means guiding the emotional weather toward clarity through the steadiness of your own climate. When the storm finally quiets, when her expression softens and her voice lowers to a register closer to calm, there will be a moment, subtle but unmistakable, when she truly sees you. It will not come with applause or apology, but with a deep exhale, a pause in which the entire dynamic recalibrates. In that instant, she recognizes that she is safe, not because you have controlled her, but because you have mastered yourself. The game ends there. The proving, the arguing, the endless need for validation dissolves, replaced by presence, heavy, grounded, undeniable. From that point forward, her tests lose their edge, not because she has been subdued, but because they are no longer necessary. The purpose of the test was revelation, not punishment. It sought to reveal the man who could stand unmoved amid uncertainty, and now that she has seen him, her instincts rest. You will notice it in her eyes, in the ease of her laughter, in the way the space between you fills with a quieter trust. The stillness you cultivated within yourself becomes the environment she can finally relax into, and both of you move closer to the rare equilibrium where respect replaces resistance. Remember then that peace is not found in controlling the world outside you, but in commanding the world within. The man who learns to govern his emotions becomes ungovernable by circumstance, and that unshakable composure is what turns fleeting attraction into lasting reverence. To stay unmoved is to stand in the center of the storm until even the storm begins to listen. And when that happens, you will understand that the purpose of her test was never to break you, but to help you remember who you were always meant to be. A woman's test is never about words, it's about vibration. Long before she decides what to think of you, her body has already made 1,000 silent calculations. It listens not to logic, but to tone, to rhythm, to the microscopic tremors hidden beneath your calm exterior. She is attuned to energy the way a wild animal is attuned to weather. She can feel when the air changes, when your energy tightens, when your breathing falters, when your tone rises a single pitch. She senses that something inside you has lost balance, and instinctively she mirrors it back to you. Most men think they are being attacked, when in truth they are being shown their own reflection. Every test she gives you is a mirror. It reflects the level of mastery you've reached in your own discipline. If you are ruled by impulse, the mirror cracks. If you are grounded in purpose, the mirror reveals your strength. The entire dynamic, though it feels like conflict, is actually the most ancient psychological dance between chaos and order. Her emotion is chaos, alive, fluid, unpredictable. Your calm is order, structure, form, direction. When chaos meets order without violence, creation happens. But when order collapses under chaos, destruction begins. That is why your steadiness determines not only her respect, but also the harmony of the relationship itself. What she is truly measuring is the depth of your self-trust. The feminine mind, driven by instinct and emotion, can only relax in the presence of something that feels unshakably secure. She tests to feel whether your confidence is real or rehearsed, whether it was built from external approval or forged through solitude and struggle. You cannot fake this energy. It carries the scent of authenticity that no posture can replicate. The man who has confronted his own chaos, who has walked through his own darkness, emits a calm that silences storms before they even arrive. He does not need to prove that he is unmoved, because he has already faced the places inside himself that would have made him flinch. This is why Stoicism, at its truest level, is not a philosophy of suppression, but of understanding. Marcus Aurelius and Seneca never taught emotional detachment. They taught emotional precision. the ability to distinguish between what belongs to you and what doesn't, between reaction and response. When she tests you, she is unknowingly reminding you of that distinction. The temptation to argue, to defend, to justify, all of it is the ego's desperate attempt to be right instead of being wise. Wisdom doesn't argue, it observes. And when observation deepens, presence becomes your weapon, silent, elegant, impossible to imitate. The greatest paradox of emotional power is that the less you chase control, the more control you have. The man who can sit in the heat of provocation without losing form radiates a presence that feels almost supernatural. His calmness becomes gravitational. People find themselves softening around him without knowing why. He doesn't dominate through fear, but through certainty. He doesn't raise his voice because his silence already commands attention. And for a woman whose emotional compass is constantly searching for stability, that kind of man becomes an anchor. Not because he demands loyalty, but because he embodies safety. There is also a darker truth beneath all of this. One that Machiavelli would have understood well. The same steadiness that earns respect also reveals weakness in others. When you stop reacting, those who thrived on your emotional compliance will begin to panic. They will accuse you of coldness, distance, indifference, but beneath that accusation lies fear. Your calm forces others to confront their own lack of control. It is easier to blame your composure than to question their chaos. This is why discipline must never be used for validation. It must be built for self-governance. If your peace depends on her approval, it isn't peace, it's a performance. True mastery requires detachment not from emotion itself, but from the need to be understood. The Stoic man does not explain his silence, because silence needs no defense. He does not try to make her see his side, because the moment you demand understanding, you've already surrendered your power. Presence doesn't seek agreement. It generates it naturally through gravity. When a man stands firmly in who he is, reality bends around him, not out of arrogance, but because certainty organizes chaos. And in that organization, a woman feels something she cannot quite name. It is not control, not superiority, but the calm assurance of leadership. In the beginning, her tests may intensify. Instinct will resist what it cannot yet classify. She will provoke, retreat, challenge, observe, not because she wishes to hurt you, but because her subconscious is trying to confirm whether your strength remains consistent under pressure. This is the psychological equivalent of fire testing gold. If you melt, you were never pure. But when she sees that no matter how much heat she brings, you only become clearer, sharper, more defined. Something shifts. The challenge becomes trust, and the tension transforms into magnetism. She no longer tests for proof, she tests for connection, and in that transition, attraction deepens into respect. Understand this. The reason your composure affects her so profoundly is because it reawakens something primal inside her psyche, the yearning to rest within masculine certainty. It is not about gender roles or dominance, it is about psychological polarity. In a world where most men are addicted to reaction, a man who remains still becomes a myth. His calm whispers, "Nothing you do can pull me away from myself." That is the sentence every feminine soul unconsciously longs to hear, not through words, but through presence, because once she believes that, she can finally stop fighting for control and start surrendering to peace. The test was never the problem. The problem was always your interpretation of it. When you stop seeing it as confrontation and start seeing it as calibration, everything changes. You stop resisting, you start leading. You stop taking it personally, you start embodying purpose. And when you reach that level of discipline, where every challenge becomes an opportunity to reinforce your center, you no longer play the emotional games that drain ordinary men. You've transcended them. The battlefield turns into a mirror, and in that reflection you recognize the truth. Composure is not what protects you from chaos. Composure is chaos mastered. There comes a moment in every man's life when silence becomes heavier than words. It happens quietly, after years of reaction, explanation, and effort, when he realizes that nothing he says can communicate what his energy already declares. That is the birth of authority. It is not theatrical, not performative. It's the kind of power that cannot be borrowed or faked, because it is forged only through suffering witnessed and survived in solitude. When you've endured your own storms, the tempests of others no longer shake you. They simply remind you of the peace you earned. That is when a woman's test stops being a threat and becomes a mirror, showing you how far you've evolved. To remain unmoved is to live beyond approval. It means your emotional balance no longer hangs on how she perceives you. Her warmth may rise and fall, her tone may shift like tides, but your essence stays still. Not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've stopped depending. Dependency breeds fear, and fear distorts perception. The moment you need validation, your power dissolves. The man who no longer chases reassurance becomes magnetic, not out of arrogance, but because self-possession is the rarest form of confidence. In a world addicted to display, his restraint becomes art. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They saw that strength was never about hardness. It was about depth. A shallow lake looks calm only until the wind touches it, but the ocean remains vast and silent even in the face of storms. Depth absorbs chaos. It doesn't react to it. When you cultivate that kind of inner vastness, no test can pull you off center because there is no edge to fall from. Your presence becomes an atmosphere, not defensive, not aggressive, simply undeniable. Women, men, even strangers feel it before you speak. It's the quiet confidence of a man who carries his peace like armor. This state cannot be taught through tricks or tactics. It has to be lived. You must fail, react, lose control, and then reflect until awareness becomes reflex. You must watch yourself get pulled into emotion, feel the shame of it, and then use that shame as the forge where composure is refined. Every mistake becomes metal. Every heartbreak becomes tempering heat. Over time, discipline stops feeling like effort and becomes identity. When a man reaches that point, he no longer asks how to stay calm. He simply is. And that's the real secret. Stoicism isn't the suppression of chaos. It's the quiet ownership of it. For the woman who meets such a man, something profound happens. Her instinct, once restless, defensive, scanning for weakness, begins to rest. She no longer seeks safety through control because she can feel it in his steadiness. The psychological polarity completes its circuit. The masculine's calm becomes the container in which the feminine can expand. There is no domination here, no hierarchy, only the natural geometry of energy finding balance. The relationship stops being a competition and turns into a collaboration of rhythm and stillness, chaos and structure, emotion and reason. Each polarity defines the other, and in that definition, both grow stronger. Yet the man's journey doesn't end there. The moment he realizes that staying unmoved was never about her, but about himself, he steps into a higher form of discipline, one untouched by circumstance. He no longer practices composure to win respect or attraction. He practices it because inner order is the only true freedom. He becomes the kind of man who can walk through betrayal, disappointment, temptation, or praise without losing proportion. His peace is no longer reactive, it's generative. He doesn't calm the storm, he becomes the reason it passes. And so the cycle closes where it began. The tests that once triggered him now feel like echoes of an old world he no longer belongs to. When she becomes emotional, he listens. When she withdraws, he remains. When life shakes him, he simply breathes. His identity is no longer tied to outcome. Respect, love, admiration, they all follow naturally as reflections of a center that cannot be moved. What began as a battle for validation ends as a meditation on being. The once frantic chase for understanding dissolves into quiet knowing. No one can truly test a man who already knows himself. This is what it means to ascend, not socially, not romantically, but spiritually. To move from reacting to ruling, from chaos to command, from needing to knowing. And when you embody that, you don't just earn her respect, you awaken it. Because respect, in the end, isn't something given. It's something drawn out by presence so stable that even the storm bows before it. The test was never hers. It was yours. And the reward was never her approval, but the peace that comes from realizing you no longer need it.